One final game, Shane, the SEC on CBS game of the week. Number 9, Alabama at number 11, Ole Miss. Both these teams, Shane, still in it for the SEC West, not mathematically eliminated by any means. Crimson Tide favored by 12 points on the road. The over-under 64.5 points. The game, of course, kicks off at 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central on CBS. Last season, Alabama won 42-21 in Tuscaloosa. They're 57-10 with 2 ties all time against Ole Miss and 10-3 in Oxford. They've won 6 in a row. The average score in those 6 games, Shane, Alabama 56, Ole Miss 25. So these have not really even been that competitive. And old Lane, he's 0-3 against his daddy, Nick Saban. Does he get his first win over Nick Saban here on Saturday?
Oh, it's going to be a fun environment, I'll tell you that. Get your popcorn ready, as they say. This is always fun watching these two guys go against each other. Just the build-up, the snide comments you're going to hear right there as Lane gets there at the stadium. And he'll probably fire off a tweet right before kickoff. So I'm excited just to see what kind of media content we get, because it's just a good environment. The problem that Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss has, brother, is I think the part of this schedule. Like, if this were week 1, Ole Miss would have a better opportunity to upset Alabama. If Alabama was undefeated, I think Ole Miss would have a better opportunity to upset the Crimson Tide in this game. But the fact of the matter is, Nick is coming off yet another devastating loss.
Yeah,
you've got we've seen it. The smoke signals coming out of camp. Is Bill even going to show up to this game? And there's all this noise that you're hearing, and I think Nick and company get back to Alabama football, man. Just some tough-nosed football. Get back to the running. They got away from it during this LSU game. I think they lean in on it, and that's something Ole Miss has had a little bit of tough time stopping, is that running game. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Bryce is the best quarterback in the country, and he will be a tool that they'll use here, but it doesn't need to just come down to Bryce's arm. And when you think about the 2 losses that Alabama has had, less than a field goal between the two, it's come down to a shootout between Bryce and the other team. It doesn't need to be that way. And I think that's what Alabama does, is get back to its root. It gets physical, because they can be physical and they can beat Ole Miss just with the running game. There's part of me that says, that wants to pile on Nick Saban. There's a part of me that says, man, what about because I did this after Tennessee won. I was like, what about a 2-loss Alabama? What about a 3-loss Alabama? I'm here for it, brother. He's had a good run. It's time for them to get some losses. I just don't see Lane Kiffin doing it. But man, wouldn't it be an awesome story? Wouldn't it be great if Lane Kiffin? I can only imagine the shit he would say post-game after. I mean, even, I'm saying he couldn't get to a camera quick enough if he wins this thing. But unfortunately, you're catching Bama at a wrong time, and that's why I like them winning big. 42, Ole Miss 28.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you had to say. I mean, Alabama's offense, you just look at the numbers, Shane, at a major advantage going up against this Ole Miss defense. Ole Miss certainly, I got confidence they'll be able to run the ball, even though Alabama has shown they can stop it. But I think your main point there, Shane, when we start doubting Alabama, when we start criticizing the dynasty, when we start saying this is the end, that's when Alabama responds the most. You know what?
Yeah.
I would love, just like you said, to pick against Alabama. Hell, I've picked against them even in the last year's matchup. They won by 3 touchdowns, and I believe it could have been even worse. So it's just hard to see. It's hard to ever pick against Alabama, Shane. And every time I do, they win big. When I pick them to win, they lose. So I don't want to spoil my pick so early, but I guess I already have. I'll pick against Ole Miss and see what they can come up with. But I just think they'll respond to this matchup. I'm not trying to disrespect the Ole Miss fans, but I think Baton Rouge, Neyland Stadium, I think that's a different animal than playing in Vaught Hemingway Stadium. I know they can get loud. I know they can get crazy. It should be one hell of an environment, but it's not a night game. I think that also kind of hurts the Ole Miss faithful there. It would have been a lot more rowdy at night. Alabama, I just think, man, they still got Bryce Young, Shane.
Yeah.
And I think last week against LSU, he played, a B+ game, and hell, it came down to a 2-point conversion and overtime on the road to beat him. You have to just play at such a high level. And if Jackson Dart, do we have confidence that he's going to be able to trade scores with Bryce Young? I mean, no, there's not a chance in hell. Maybe in a year or two but Bryce will already be in his second season in the NFL. You know what I mean? So that's not to discredit Jackson Dart, because I think he's a promising talent, but he's just not ready for that. Judkins is great. Zach Evans is great. They'll get theirs in this game. They will keep it competitive. I see it a little bit closer than you, but again, Alabama's getting called out. Their manhood's being challenged. They're losing these big-time games because they're having all these penalties. They're playing on discipline. I just don't think we're going to get that version of Alabama this weekend. I'd be stunned if we do. They haven't lost back-to-back regular season games since 2008, Shane, as crazy as that is. Give me Alabama, but give me Ole Miss and the points. I'm going Alabama 38, Ole Miss 28, so just barely covering that spread. But I do think this could be a really good game. I just think in the fourth quarter, I think Alabama takes control of it.
Yeah, and I think it is a prominent running game. You look at Ole Miss. The last 4 games, they've had Texas A&M, LSU, Auburn, and Vanderbilt. All 4 of those teams have had 100-yard rushing. So I expect Alabama to have a 100-yard rusher, and that's only going to make things easier for Bryce. So that's when I say getting back to the roots. That's when you think of Bama. I don't know about you, brother. I think a good defense and a hell of a running game. Now the quarterbacks have kind of stole the show here the last few seasons, but sometimes you got to get back to your roots, and I think that's what Saban and company do. But brother, before you get going too far, I want to ask you one question, because we got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ranked games being played Saturday. I'd like for you to rank upset possibility here. Okay. So I've already got my list because I've been thinking about it. So I'll go, that give you some time to think about it. And we're going to go from like least likely to most likely. So I think least likely is Kentucky losing to Vanderbilt. 24th ranked Kentucky. That was my lock of the week. I have no confidence that Vanderbilt's going to win that game, especially with Swan out. Then I go to Georgia, Mississippi State. Again, full confident that the Georgia Bulldogs get that game. Now, here's where things get a little bit murky. I'm going to go Ole Miss, Alabama. Even though I just said Alabama, beats Lane Kiffin and company. I don't know why I keep saying company. When did that become a thing? I don't know, but I need to stop. Sometimes Mike stops me. So I'll say a word over and over again. He's like, dude, stop saying that word so much. Okay. So no more company talk. But I put them 3. No confidence that Alabama loses this game. Now, the 2 that I'm worried about, because one of them involves my balls, is the Tennessee-Mizzou game. I see there being a slim chance. I'm not saying they're calling it an upset for a reason. I'm putting Tennessee on upset alert because of the time of the game, not just actual noon, but the fact that it's right after this Georgia game. There's just so many factors, and we get caught looking ahead, and we just can't afford to do that. And then I would have at the top, of course, LSU Arkansas, because I can see there being a possibility Arkansas wins that game. So what would be your list if you're ranking those 5 games?
Yeah, not to be too anticlimactic. I think you did a great job there, but I think for me, the least likely upset, you put Vanderbilt, Kentucky.
Yeah.
I think it's Georgia losing to Mississippi State. That seems the least likely to me. Number 2 for me is that Vanderbilt beating Kentucky, just because Kentucky is ranked. I get it. I'm trying not to be disrespectful to them, but they have been up and down. They play up to and down the level of competition. Remember, they've had some non-conference games. It's like, how is this a ball game in the fourth quarter? You know, you're favored
Right.
by 20 points, and Miami of Ohio's got the ball. They can win this damn game. So, you know, Kentucky's a flawed team, but they are playing Vanderbilt. Number 3, I agree with you. Alabama being upset would be a surprise to me.
Mm-hmm.
But number 2, I'm right there with you. Tennessee. I think that, again, if Brady Cook shows up and he lights it up, there's a good chance they beat Tennessee. I don't have confidence necessarily in him and that Missouri offense, but the defense is incredible. This is the matchup of the weekend in my mind, the Missouri defense versus the Tennessee offense. Cannot wait to see that. And yeah, I said it'll be a 4-point game, so I got to go LSU, most likely to get upset. And I forgot to mention this when I was picking that game, Shane, but I would not even be surprised if Arkansas goes into the fourth with a lead. But we've seen this. They've gotten down in a bunch of games. Auburn comes to mind. There was Florida State, obviously. They did lose that game, but they got down. They got down in the Ole Miss game.
Yeah.
They get down in these games, but they have a hell of a strength and conditioning coach, apparently, because they get tough as hell in the fourth quarter. They finish the deal. And that's how I think they come out with a 4-point win on the road at Arkansas. But let me ask you asked me a question, so I want to ask you one real quick. If Alabama does lose, which neither one of us is picking,
Fire
and hell, we do.
Get him out of there.
We just said it's unlikely. But, man, that's 3 out of 4 SEC games lost. And, you know, I don't hear enough people talking about this, Shane. Remember a couple years ago, Scott Cochran left to go to Georgia, and they brought in these, like, they're like nutrition scientist people. I don't know what the hell they do, but everyone was, we don't need Scott Cochran. We're a new age training staff and all this. Not only is it coordinators are questionable, I think, you know, this team is lacking energy. They're lacking discipline. That's where the strength and conditioning program comes in, I think. And that's basically what those guys do during the game is get these kids hyped up and get them ready to play. And that ain't been happening. So I think, I think the meltdown would be epic in Tuscaloosa if they lose this game. I'm not firing Nick Saban, but God, it's the dynasty will be dead if they lose this one, in my opinion.
3 games, the goalpost coming down. Well, the goalpost didn't come down at LSU, but 3 games. Could you imagine just being on that? But it is Alabama, and I don't want to pile up on them. You had an interesting stat with Mizzou there. I mean, you could say the same thing with Alabama. They're 4 points away from being undefeated. Yeah. 4 points. So, losing 3 would be catastrophic, but not for Nick Saban. Not for this fan base, not for these players, but for those assistant coaches. Some of them just may not make it back home. You know, they may start working with Lane down there. So, I mean, you gotta mention it, but I don't get me wrong. Lane Kiffin's going to have some stuff dialed up, and I can't wait to see what he rolls out.
Yep.
Especially those first 2 drives that he gets. So,
2 weeks to prepare. The wrinkles are going to come out. You know.
Absolutely, man. So